Have you ever wished you could stay calm, no matter what anyone says or does? Imagine living a life where no one can steal your peace, where you stop reacting and start responding with power and clarity. Carl Jung, one of the most brilliant minds in psychology, believed that our anger and emotional triggers reveal more about ourselves than they do about others. In this video, we dive deep into Jung's insights on the shadow, the ego, and emotional mastery. You'll learn how to turn your reactions into revelations and how to reclaim your peace from the chaos around you. This isn't about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming unshakable. So if you're ready to stop being triggered and start living consciously, you're in the right place. Carl Jung introduced the concept of the shadow as a fundamental aspect of the human psyche. The shadow represents the parts of ourselves that we refuse to acknowledge, traits, impulses, desires, and weaknesses we've been taught to hide or feel ashamed of. From childhood, we learn to present only certain aspects of ourselves that are socially acceptable or rewarded, while the rest is pushed into the unconscious. But the unconscious doesn't forget. These suppressed parts of us don't disappear. They wait, and they opt in emotional reactions like anger, judgment, envy, and projection. When someone provokes you, when their behavior triggers an intense emotional response, it is often a sign that they are activating a part of your shadow. You may not consciously recognize this, but deep down, the person is mirroring something unresolved within you. This could be a trait you disown, a wound you haven't healed, or a fear you haven't faced. For example, if arrogance enrages you, perhaps there is an unacknowledged part of you that wishes to express confidence but feels suppressed by guilt or fear. Jung believed that our outer conflicts are reflections of inner fragmentation. When we refuse to own our shadow, we become vulnerable to being controlled by it. The key to overcoming anger and emotional reactivity lies in this awareness. Rather than blaming others for our irritation, we can pause and ask, what is this showing me about myself? This shift in focus transforms anger from a destructive force into a powerful guide for personal growth. The moment you realize that your reaction is more about your inner world than the other person, you begin to reclaim control. You are no longer at the mercy of external triggers. You start the process of integrating your shadow, which means welcoming these disowned parts back into your conscious self with honesty and compassion. This is not easy work. The shadow often holds pain, shame, and discomfort. But within it also lies our hidden potential: courage, creativity, assertiveness, and emotional depth. When we bring light to the shadow, we become more whole, more grounded, and less reactive. People no longer have the same power to disturb our peace because we are no longer running from ourselves. As Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. To understand the shadow is to step into a journey of self-mastery, where every irritation becomes an invitation to deeper awareness. And that is the first and perhaps most essential step to never being truly angry or bothered by anyone again. In Jungian psychology, the distinction between the ego and the self is central to understanding our emotional reactivity. The ego is the part of us that forms our conscious identity. It is the mental construct we build to navigate the world, who we think we are based on our experiences, roles, beliefs, and social interactions. The ego is necessary, it gives us structure, but it also has limitations. It craves validation, fears vulnerability, and reacts defensively to perceived threats. When someone disrespects us, ignores us, or challenges our opinions, it is often the ego that flares up in anger or hurt. Carl Jung, however, spoke of the self as something far more expansive. The self is the totality of the psyche, both conscious and unconscious. It represents the wholeness of who we truly are beyond the mask of the ego, beyond societal expectations, beyond our limited self-image. While the ego seeks to protect, the self seeks to integrate. When we are dominated by ego, we are always on guard, interpreting the world as either for or against us. This black and white thinking keeps us stuck in cycles of reactivity. But as we begin to shift our awareness from ego to self, something profound changes. We stop needing to be right all the time. We stop taking things so personally. We develop a spaciousness within us that allows us to observe, rather than react. Someone might criticize us, and instead of immediately defending ourselves, we pause and reflect. Is there truth in this? Is this worth my energy? From the perspective of the self, not every disagreement is a threat, and not every insult requires retaliation. We understand that people act from their own perspectives, wounds, and stories, and that often their behavior has little to do with us. This inner shift does not make us passive. It makes us powerful. It means we can engage with the world without being consumed by it. It means we can assert ourselves without aggression, listen without defensiveness, and walk away without resentment. The ego wants to win, but the self wants to grow. And growth means choosing peace over pride, understanding over control. Jung taught that the journey toward emotional freedom is the journey from ego to self. It is not about eliminating the ego it plays a role, but about placing it in service to something higher. When the ego is no longer the master, but the servant of the self, we begin to live with wisdom. We see conflict not as a battlefield, but as a mirror. We learn that true strength comes not from dominating others, but from mastering ourselves. And with that mastery, we become less reactive, less angry, and ultimately unbothered. Carl Jung identified projection as one of the most subtle yet powerful forces that shape how we see others and ourselves. Projection occurs when we unconsciously transfer parts of our own psyche onto other people. Usually those traits, desires, or emotions that we've denied or repressed within ourselves. It is not just an occasional mistake in perception. It is a fundamental psychological defense mechanism that plays out in everyday relationships, often fueling anger, disappointment, or resentment. When someone irritates you beyond what their actions seem to warrant, it's a clue that projection may be at work. Suppose you find yourself repeatedly annoyed by someone who acts needy or dependent. There's a chance that what you're reacting to is not just their behavior, but your own hidden discomfort with your own vulnerability, a part of you that was shamed or rejected in the past. Similarly, if you're constantly triggered by someone's arrogance, ask yourself whether there's a suppressed desire for recognition or power within you that you've disowned. The real danger of projection is that it creates a false sense of external conflict when the real battle is internal. We see others as the problem without realizing we're looking at our own disowned traits reflected back to us. Jung described projection as a kind of psychological blindness. It allows us to displace our unresolved emotions and flaws onto others, making them easier to criticize than to confront within. However, recognizing projection is a turning point. The moment you begin to ask, what part of me is being shown in this person? You step into consciousness. You begin to take responsibility for your emotional world. Instead of feeling helpless or angry, you become curious. Why does this behavior stir such a strong reaction in me? What belief or wound is being activated? This level of introspection breaks the automatic chain of reaction. Projection loses its power the moment it becomes conscious. When you realize that your anger may be pointing towards something unresolved within, the external person no longer holds control over your emotions. You can detach not with cold indifference, but with clear awareness. You are not denying the hurt or the frustration, but you're choosing to look inward first. This doesn't mean you excuse toxic behavior or refuse to set boundaries. Quite the opposite when you stop projecting. You actually see people more clearly. You respond rather than react. You choose healthy boundaries, not out of fear or resentment, but out of self-respect. You are no more shadow scrubbing with your own unconscious emotions disguised as other people. You are grounded, observant, and emotionally free. As Jung put it, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. in learning to see your projections. You open the door to self-awareness and self-compassion. And as that awareness grows, you'll find fewer and fewer people have the power to get under your skin. You no longer need the world to change in order for you to be at peace. You have changed the way you see it. Mindful detachment is one of the most powerful emotional tools we can cultivate, especially in a world that constantly demands our attention and reactions. Carl Jung didn't use the word mindfulness as it's commonly known today, but his work pointed toward the same inner awareness and non-reactivity that lies at the heart of mindfulness practices. For Jung, the ability to step back and observe our emotions without immediately acting on them was a key sign of consciousness. And this conscious detachment was never about apathy, it was about wisdom. To practice mindful detachment means to allow space between what happens and how we respond. It's the difference between reacting and reflecting. When someone says something hurtful or disrespectful, the immediate impulse might be to lash out or defend ourselves. But if we can pause, breathe, and create a moment of stillness, we reclaim our power. In that space, we are no longer driven by emotion, we are led by awareness. This doesn't mean suppressing feelings or pretending we're unaffected. Quite the opposite. It means being fully present with our emotional experience, without letting it dictate our behavior. We acknowledge the anger, the hurt, the discomfort, but we don't allow it to take the wheel. We don't get swept away. Instead, we observe the emotion with curiosity. Why am I feeling this? What story am I telling myself? Is this a wound speaking or a truth? Mindful detachment allows us to engage with life from a centered place. When we develop this capacity, insults lose their sting. Manipulation loses its grip. Chaos no longer pulls us off course, because instead of being dragged into emotional storms, we become the calm eye within them. This is not detachment in the cold sense of indifference, it is a loving distance from the noise, a protective space where your inner peace is preserved. Jung believed that to become truly conscious, one must learn to relate to emotions without becoming identified with them. You are not your anger. You are not your fear. These are passing energies, not permanent identities. When we detach mindfully, we see emotions as messages rather than commands. We listen to them, learn from them, but we are not ruled by them. Over time, mindful detachment rewires the way we experience the world. You begin to notice triggers without being triggered. You observe drama without getting involved. You speak with clarity instead of reacting with volatility. And perhaps most importantly, you learn to protect your peace without building walls. You remain open, compassionate, and present, but no longer reactive. Emotional maturity is not reached overnight. It is a practice, but with each moment you choose to pause instead of react, to reflect instead of retaliate, you become stronger, more grounded, more aware. You become someone who can navigate life's difficulties without being consumed by them. And that is one of the most profound freedoms Carl Jung invites us to claim. Emotional alchemy is the process of transforming raw emotional reactions, especially the painful, uncomfortable ones, into sources of insight, growth, and even power. Carl Jung understood this well. He saw the human psyche as an ever-evolving system, capable of transmuting even the darkest emotions into light, if approached with the right attitude. Jung's work was deeply influenced by alchemical symbolism. He believed that just as lead could symbolically become gold through alchemy, our base emotions could evolve into self-awareness and inner peace through psychological integration. At the heart of emotional alchemy is one essential truth: your emotions are not enemies to be controlled, they are messages to be understood. When anger arises, it is not simply an interruption to be silenced. It is a signal, a symptom of something within asking for your attention. Maybe it points to a boundary that has been violated. Maybe it reveals a part of yourself that feels unseen or disrespected. The alchemist does not dismiss the emotion, they study it, hold it, and ask, what transformation is being asked of me here? This is a radically different approach than what most of us were taught. In society, emotional control often means suppression. But Jung's view is that real mastery lies in integration, not avoidance. If anger is suppressed, it festers in the unconscious and resurfaces in toxic patterns. But if it is brought into awareness, it can guide us to action, to healing, or to a deeper truth about ourselves. The same goes for jealousy, fear, or sadness. Each one, when faced honestly, becomes part of our inner revolution. To practice emotional alchemy, we need two things: presence and courage. Presence allows us to sit with the discomfort without immediately reacting. Courage allows us to face what the emotion reveals about us. Together, they create space for reflection. And in that space, transformation happens. You realize that emotions are not happening to you, they are happening within you. And what happens within you, you can work with. As you embrace this process, you begin to notice something powerful. The emotions that once made you reactive now make you reflective. You stop seeing anger as weakness and start seeing it as a compass. You stop fearing sadness and begin honoring it as a teacher. You stop fighting your emotions and start collaborating with them. This is the essence of alchemy, not denial, but transformation. You become not just someone who manages emotions, but someone who is shaped and elevated by them. Jung believed that our wholeness lies not in rejecting any part of ourselves, but in uniting the pieces. Emotional alchemy is how we take the broken fragments and turn them into something beautiful. Through this work, your reactions become revelations, and your inner chaos becomes a source of deep peace and wisdom. And in this space, you are no longer just surviving your emotions, you are evolving through them. In a world that never stops talking, where everyone rushes to be heard, inner silence has become a rare and powerful refuge. For Carl Jung, silence wasn't emptiness, it was a gateway to the deepest truth of the psyche. To never get angry or bothered by others doesn't always mean you respond with the perfect words. Sometimes, it means saying nothing at all, not out of fear, but out of mastery. Inner silence is not passive, it's active awareness. Full presence, the ability to witness a situation without becoming entangled in it. It's what happens when you no longer need to react to yourself. You observe the chaos around you, the noise, the projections, the power plays, and you choose not to enter the arena. That is not weakness, it is strength beyond what most people can understand. We live in a reactive culture. Social media trains us to respond instantly. News cycles provoke outrage. Even in relationships, silence is often mistaken for indifference or submission. But Jung understood that the ability to remain silent, especially when provoked, is a sign of inner wholeness. It reflects a person who has made peace with their own shadow, who does not seek validation through confrontation. Inner silence doesn't mean repression. It doesn't mean you deny how you feel. Rather, you acknowledge your feelings fully, but you choose when and how to act. You are not dragged into arguments just to defend your ego. You don't match someone else's chaos with your own. Instead, you pause. You listen not just to others, but to yourself. You ask, what does my highest self want to say right now? And often the answer is nothing. Just hold the space. This kind of silence holds power. It unsettles people who thrive on emotional entanglement. It shifts the dynamic from reaction to reflection. And most importantly, it preserves your peace. Because when you master silence, you are no longer a slave to the noise of the world. You do not allow others to write your script. You choose presence over performance. Jung once wrote, "Solitude is for me a fount of healing which makes my life worth living." Silence, in its truest form, is not isolation, it is sacred solitude. It is where you meet yourself without distraction, where you find the answers that no conversation can provide. It is in silence that we integrate the lessons of the shadow, tame the impulses of the ego, and alchemize our emotions into wisdom. The next time someone tries to provoke you, try silence. Not the cold, punishing kind, but the calm, grounded kind. The kind that radiates self-respect. The kind that doesn't need to be explained. When you respond from this place, You'll find that you are no longer easily triggered, not because people have changed, but because you have. In this stillness, you are free. You no longer seek to win the moment, you seek to master yourself. And that mastery, rooted in silence, becomes your greatest protection against the chaos of others. This is the strength Carl Jung pointed us toward, not loud dominance, but quiet clarity, the strength of inner silence. In a world constantly pulling at your attention, your ability to remain calm, aware, and grounded is your superpower. Carl Jung didn't just offer theories, he offered a path to inner transformation. And that journey begins the moment you stop pointing outward and start looking within. So the next time someone tests your patience, remember it's not just a challenge. It's an invitation to grow, to reflect, to rise above. True strength isn't in how loud you respond, but in how deeply you understand. If this message spoke to you, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs this wisdom today. And leave a comment what part of this resonated with you the most. Until next time, stay aware, stay grounded, and never stop evolving.